All right, and we are live. There we go. Sorry, guys. Right before we started, my lighting setup here fell over. The light bulb broke, so I had to replace it. And now we're back, and we're good. So if the lighting looks a little different, it looks a little yellow this time. It's because I just changed the light bulb, and it was just a replacement light bulb. So you guys are gonna have to deal with that a little bit warmer color today. I'm not quite as pasty white as normal. Hello from Belgrade. Welcome everybody in. We're just waiting for everybody to slowly file in here. I'm going to retweet my live stream as normal, and then we will get started. Hopefully everybody's having a fantastic Saturday. Things are going well for me. I hope they're going well for you. Welcome from Argentina and Minnesota as well. Holy cow. Yeah. Up and go. All right, cool. Greetings from Norway. What's up, Bubbles? Algerian in Moscow. Nice. You guys are killing it in boxing right now, women's boxing. Algeria is absolutely destroying top-notch athletes. Alabama, huh? All right, guys. Enough people are in here. Let's go ahead and get into it. Welcome back. This is episode number 80 of Kalibrated Live. I am Scott, of course. If you guys want to find more of my work, you can do so by going to the link in the YouTube description. You will find my Telegram, my YouTube, and my Patreon. If you go to my Patreon and sign up as a free member, you will get access to 10 episodes of the Demonetized series for free. If you decide to support me financially, you will get access to 12. All of my content is free. It just comes out 2 weeks later for those of you who don't support me. Thank you, everybody who's supporting me on Patreon, whether you're a paid member or you're just supporting me with being in there and watching my videos, liking, subscribing, doing all of that. I appreciate it so much. You guys help me get seen. You guys help me grow. You guys make my chat better. You guys do everything. So I really do appreciate all of the work you guys do and all the help that you provide me. All right, let's go ahead and get into some map updates. I think that would be a good use of our time today. All right, let me just adjust my setup here a little bit. Adjust my chair so we can get into this, huh? Okay. So, not a ton of updates. Obviously, it's the weekend, so things get a little slow around the weekend. It should pick up tomorrow sometime for me, and for Ukraine and Russia, that would be Monday morning. So we're gonna have to wait probably until late Sunday to get a majority of the updates. But we do have some very critical updates, which are, I have been talking about some of the things that we're about to talk about for a couple of months now. And specifically, the most southern advancement, you can see down here, this little green speck, is exactly the trigger that I had talked about for a potential Russian offensive this summer. I don't know what the timing is for the Russians, but we have reached now the minimum acceptable allowance for what I consider to be a go time for some sort of Russian offensive in the southern Donetsk direction. And just a reminder, guys, if you want to go ahead and get questions in throughout this entire live stream, this live stream doesn't have quite as much information. So if you guys have questions, please go ahead and get them in. I'll be looking over a lot more frequently and answering some of them. So, are you going to apologize to the woman you defamed and wrongly accused of being a man fighting a woman? Absolutely not. I did not call that individual a trans individual. I never said it was a man. I said that they had failed a chromosome test. She had failed a chromosome test. That does not mean that she's a man. That means that she potentially has certain genetic indicators, whether it's high testosterone because of some having an XY chromosome or something like that, having greater bone density, that gives her an unfair advantage in sporting competitions. I have no problem with an Algerian woman beating an Italian woman. I did not defame anybody. And guess what happened in this Algerian's next fight? She absolutely crushed again. Almost like the competition isn't exactly like fair That's the problem I have. See, I'm a competitor. I've competed at a national level in sports in my entire life, and it's really frustrating when you see somebody not necessarily taking advantage because it's allowed. She's respecting the rules. The Olympic Committee has allowed this to happen, but previously was disallowed from competing because of this situation that she is dealing with. Obviously, if you look at her, her muscle density is much higher than every other female on stage. It's just not a fair competition, and that's the problem I have. That's the problem I have. No, this is also not true. There are XY chromosome does not equal man. You can have XY and XX chromosomes. There are multiple genetic conditions that humans have where they are hermaphroditic. She does. I do believe she has full female reproductive organs. So, all right, not talking about this anymore though. That's stupid. But I just wanted to cover that because I did make a comment on it at the beginning. Okay, back to the map. Sorry about that. So starting down here in the south, what I was just talking about, the Russians have advanced through these tree lines and have interdicted the 0532 highway. I've been talking about this for a very long time. It's pretty clear that Russian DRG activity in this area has already cut off the actual logistics capability of this road. However, it is now finally physically cut off. And this will allow the Russians to begin operating on the 0532 north and south, putting pressure on Konstantinivka, Vadiana, the mine right here, and Ugledar, which is a very, 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 very strong defensive line. This is a big, big event in terms of the tactical situation in Ukraine, and it allows the Russians, if you look, to greatly mitigate the logistics distance that they have to take once the 0532 is captured. Once this highway is captured, the Russians will be able to run logistics from Donetsk through through Marinka, down through Pabyeta along this 0532, and look at this giant gap right here behind Vugledar and Vadyan. Once the Russians break this road and get into these settlements, Vugledar, I have a feeling that the battle for Vugledar is going to be like that. It's going to just collapse very quick. And not that the Ukrainians can't defend it, but since this has happened, once the Russians end up pushing down this road, pushing out this road, capturing more, once they start putting a lot of pressure on Vadyan right here, the Ukrainian ability to keep this little fortress supplied is going to run out very, very quickly. So again, very important advance here and could be the start of something catastrophic in southern Donetsk for Ukraine. I know it doesn't look like a big advance. It's not some, breakthrough or anything. That's not the claim. It's just the Russians have now opened the opportunity to be able to operate along a paved road, which in this part of the country is gold. Honestly, there's one down here. You can see them. There's not very many. There's one right here, and some that kind of connect those. But it's very open space, guys. Just not a lot of road connection. But get ready because this is about to pop off. This little section right here is about to become very, very hot. Come back over, look and see. Hopefully everybody's doing good. Yeah, you mentioned this scenario months ago. Yeah, this is actually just where I've been talking about Ukraine having the most difficulties here in the future, because this is the area that, first off, is the extent of logistics for Ukraine, right? Ukraine has to bring logistics all the way down. The last major settlement around here is Prosnaya, maybe this one, but realistically Pokrovsk, and Pokrovsk is very, 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 very north. There's also Kharkove, but this is now in glide bomb and artillery range, so not as good for staging, much more exposed, soon to be the front line. So really there's not a huge amount of staging that can happen down here. It's hard to bring high concentrations of Ukrainian troops into the region to defend. Logistics is, like I said, it's at the maximum for the Ukrainians. So the ability for the Russians to interdict those logistics lines is much higher. This is the in terms of the tactical nature of the battlefield. There are a few areas where I believe the Russians could have major success. This southern area is one, obviously in the direction of Pokrovsk, because we are now behind the defensive lines, which I've actually made the defensive lines that I'm going to show you guys around Orchitny and Pokrovsk section for helpful to make it more helpful. And then Toretsk. Toretsk could collapse very, very soon. I don't think you're going to see a massive collapse in Chasiv Yar. The Russians have crossed the river or the canal here and have a foothold. And now the Russians are talking about expanding that foothold into these streets here. So that's definitely going on. But Chasiv Yar is so vital to the overall Ukrainian defense of Slavyansk, Kramatorsk, Druzhkivka, and Konstantinivka that if Chasiv Yar falls and this high ground is captured, not only does the entire east fall for Ukraine, and I mean, it's more than just these settlements, right? It's also Siversk up here. New York and Toretsk will completely collapse if Chasiv Yar falls, and then the Russians can start putting pressure on this intersection right here. Chasiv Yar is really just a key spot, and it's on the high ground. So the Ukrainians want to hold this with everything they possibly have. They have already failed to hold the Russians over the canal line, which was the initial line of defense. So that has been breached. We could see something fast develop, but I think that the majority of Ukrainian reserves and resources are being dedicated to the Chasiv Yar and Kharkov salients right now. So I would not expect massive quick movements from here, but anything is possible. And then up here in the north in Kupiansk, obviously the Russians are going to continue applying pressure. However, this area is it's proven difficult to move through for both sides. During the Kharkov offensive, once the Ukrainians got on this side of the Oskol and the Russians actually started fighting them, they were never able to reach Kremenaya. So that was a failure on the Ukrainian part. And the Russians have been trying to take Sinkivka for how long now and still haven't been able to. So very hard to advance in this area, and probably not going to see a ton of quick progress just with the way Ukraine is dedicating resources to this front right here. And then up in the Volvychansk region, it's just continuous fighting. It's really nothing. I did end up removing the crossing here. It does appear that the Russians were not able to sustain it, which was very likely considering the river is quite wide right here. I'm surprised that they were even able to cross here. I would expect that this would need to be captured before they were able to cross over here somewhere, more or less. But yeah, so that's a small update to that front. All right, moving back down. Interdict. You guys are goofy. All right. Scott, is there any possibility for the Ukrainians to stabilize the Pokrovsk front, or the Russian wave just continue flooding the Ukrainian defenses? There's always a possibility, right? You can never say that there's not consistently an opportunity for that to happen. So first and foremost, I want to just talk about some of the advances here. So the Russians have advanced just south of Vovoche and have captured a large fortification that was located in this tree line connection right here, this four-way tree line. So that fortification has fallen. The Russians have also advanced down the railway from Vesel and have entered Serhivka and Zeleny over here. Zeleny, I don't know. So they have entered both of these settlements, and again, putting an immense amount of pressure along the railroad, which I talked about. Again, if you go back to one of my videos on my YouTube page, I believe it's called something Pokrovsk. You guys can look it up. It's like episode 78 or 80 or something like that of my actual videos, not my live streams. But if you've been watching my live streams, you know I've been talking about this forever. It's very simple, guys. If we go over here to the topographical map, I'll show you again. All of those who have been around here for forever know exactly what I'm going to say. But the railroad, you can see it clearly follows the high ground. The Russians have captured the majority of the high ground in this region now. So they're now are looking down on places like Khyorivka and Mihrod and Pokrovsk over here. So these three major settlements that the Russians are moving into are not particularly placed on advantageous ground, unlike Orchitny and all of the defensive lines of the Ukrainian armed forces that have now been breached. And the Russians are down here through Pokrovsk, through Vesel, into Sokhivka, and into Zeleny. So really, the Russians are already here, right? The Russians are almost onto the last significant chunk of high ground. Expect the Russians to push down in here, push through here, capture this settlement, which let me go and see what this one is actually. Novohodorivka. Okay, so Novohodorivka. Once that's captured, I believe that you will begin to earnestly see the Battle of Pokrovsk, which is, I don't know, I would count probably Novohodorivka. The names are hard to read when Hordivka, Mihrad, and Pokrovsk. Okay, yeah, so these four right here, Mihrad, Pokrovsk, and these two. Once the Russians enter these, I believe you can say that the battle for the Pokrovsk conglomeration has begun. Again, logistics are going to be much more difficult to run out of this logistics, position. Pokrovsk is the logistical hub of the entire east of Ukraine. But the Russians are going to keep pushing along the railroad, pushing along the high ground, and once they secure Pokrovsk, again, Pokrovsk is just the southern Izium to me. So if you guys, look at the map up here, we have Izum, and Izum was of vital importance to the Russians because it opened up the door. You could basically push down this road, and you are on the backside of Slavyansk. This was so important for the Ukrainians to recapture because it prevented a massive situation from unfolding in the east of the country. So this was vital. When you look down here, Pokrovsk is the exact same thing. If you look at where Pokrovsk is located, it's further west from the eastern fortification cities, and it's along the major highways that travel right behind it. So capturing Pokrovsk and then pushing north will create massive, massive difficulties for logistics and the AFU garrisons in this area. Watch Pokrovsk, guys. Watch Pokrovsk. Pokrovsk. Watch Pokrovsk. It's very, very important. Aiden, what are the size of Ukraine, Russia troop size on those front lines? You are talking about, do the Ukrainians have the numbers to hold the line? Do the Russians have the reserves to hold any ground they may capture? Okay, so we don't know because we just don't have we don't have the numbers, right? To make any claim here would be very disingenuous. But I'll make a guess based off of what I'm seeing on the battlefield. So along all of these fronts right here in the York, Toretsk, Chasiv Yar, the southern Donetsk front, and Pokrovsk, it seems that the Russians are enjoying a manpower, artillery, and aviation advantage. So the progress has been quick for the Russians. I mean, this is a huge chunk. You're talking 2.34 square miles in one update. That used to be like a month, right? I'm going to take this for a second just to kind of give you guys an idea of what this is. Look at this up against Bakhmut. I know Bakhmut is an urban area, right? But look at how much territory the Russians are now capturing. This was like 3 or 4 months of fighting in Bakhmut. Even when it was over here, up near Kromove and Yehidne. Do you guys, oh, I can't click it. Okay. Did I mess up? I might have messed up. Boys. Let me get it back. Hold on. Okay, here we go. Even when it was, over here by Yehidne and Kromove, I mean, that distance right there, it took the Russians how long to go that far? Wagner, how far did it take Wagner to go that far? Let's see, from Berhivka to Bogdanivka. Remember how long the fighting in Bogdanivka took? And the Russians just captured basically the whole settlement in one go of it. So that's all I'm referring to when I'm talking about, the territory coming much faster than we've ever previously seen, right? And in this area, I mean, you're seeing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different directions the Russians are advancing every single day. It appears that the Ukrainians are completely depleted. We're hearing stories about the 47th Mechanized Brigade, who's been romped in this region, having basically being completely depleted, unable to hold the line anywhere. And that's why you're seeing Russian progress and why this area is becoming such a hotbed for the Ukrainian defenders. If you look at the other areas of the map, though, there's a couple things that could be going on. One, I don't think the Russians are particularly pushing very hard up in the Vovchansk, Kharkov region, but the Ukrainians are, and the Ukrainians are committing a lot of resources to this front still to this day. Over here in the Kupiansk front, the Russians are pushing very hard, but the ground is just difficult to advance on. The Ukrainians have strong defenses here, and the Ukrainians are prioritizing this region because they know that if this salient right here falls, the Russians are going to again be knocking on the door of Liman and Slavyansk. And they also know that in this area, these advances in terms of PR, in Pokrovsk area, in York and Toretsk, you can kind of push these off as, the Russians just took some fields. It's just some fields. It's just a little village of 100 people or 200 people or whatever. If you lose basically the entire benefit of the Kharkov offensive very, very quickly along this Oskol River, that is going to crush morale. Losing a city that you're fighting for has some sort of honor and, I don't know how you would say it. It's just easier to prevent morale from completely collapsing if the advances are slow and you can make them appear costly, I guess, is the only way I could really put it. So in terms of where the Russians have a manpower advantage, I think most of the front now, the Russians enjoy a manpower advantage from, Kherson City up to about Liman area. And then from Liman north to potentially Chasiv Yar alone, and then Liman north to Vovchansk, the Ukrainians likely have a force disposition advantage in this area. But that is just based off of where we're seeing progress. Reports from brigades complaining about resources being sent to the Kharkov region when they're needed in, Novomihайловka, which eventually fell, and Konstantinivka and stuff like that. Was Chasiv Yar in Star Trek TNG? I have no idea, dude. And that's exactly why the Russians opened up in the north. Yep, and that's exactly what I talked about when they did it. Thoughts where the fight is easier, rural areas or unbanned. Oh, urbanized. I was like, unbanished. Urban battles are much more difficult for both sides. For the Ukrainians, the Russians are able just to level buildings at will with their glide bombs and stuff like that. So, fighting in urban centers is very difficult for the Ukrainians in terms of casualties, but the Ukrainians don't seem to care about casualties. So for the Russians, I would say urban fighting probably benefits them, even though it tends to come with higher casualties. And I think that the reason for this is because, well, one, the way the Ukrainians choose to fight. They don't retreat. They hold. So the Russians can just do this slow grind thing where that really benefits them in the long run. In the short run, like the Battle of Bakhmut had a good amount of casualties for Wagner and Russian forces, right? It was like a 6-month battle. I think the Wagner sustained 20,000 casualties. 2,500 were professional contracted soldiers, and 18,000 were prisoners that were used. But the Ukrainians suffered horrifically inside the city. So while the casualties might be higher for the Russians than, say, moving through some fields, I think that the Russians are very, very, very well adapted to fighting in urban combat. I think they understand it very well. and I think they do they're very proficient at fighting in this sort of environment. So while it might have higher casualties, the results of the fighting for the Russians is more beneficial than fighting in the open fields, right? I don't think that the Ukrainians are sustaining as much damage in open fields as they are in urban areas to the Russians. All right. Okay, moving to the Toretsk salient. Actually, I didn't finish talking about this. So Vesel was completely captured by the Russian forces, and then the Russian forces advanced out of Timofivka along the Krasny Toretsk river here, and have also advanced into Ivanivka. I think that Ivanivka is more captured than I have it showing, but I don't have a geolocation yet, so I'm not increasing this width. But pretty impressive. You can see how devastating it has been for the Ukrainians since the loss of Orshitny here. Just not an exact estimate here, but 47, almost 50 square miles has been lost since the fall of Orshitny. So pretty massive there for the Russians. And just the area that it's in, if you guys, oh yeah, I forgot. If you guys look here, I have actually put a lot of the defensive fortifications on my map. So if you zoom in, if you zoom out, they're kind of thick and they just look like little bubbles. But if you zoom in, you can see where all the fortifications are. So when I talked about the Russians advancing down from Zeleny, these are the series of fortifications here that the Russians are going to try to capture on the Vavocha River, allowing the Russians to push out of Novosilivka, Persha, and Yasnobrodivka here and capture the rest of this little territory. But you can see that the Russians are advancing. And this is all of them, by the way. This is all of the lines of defense. I think that there is one last one over here in front of Pokrovsk, but the Russians are literally 5 miles from being beyond any significant fortified defensive lines. I imagine the Ukrainians are trying to build stuff back here, but as we've seen, all of these ones were hastily built, and they're falling much, much quicker than these ones, which were built during the war, and much quicker than these ones, which were built before the war. So it just continues to degrade for the Ukrainian armed forces in the Pokrovsk area. Okay. Moving up here now to the New York salient. So the Russians have advanced and likely captured almost all of Zelezny here, and have likely entered into the southern part of Toretsk, or the eastern part of Toretsk, sorry. So fully capturing this area to the east, or to the south of Zelezny, I guess, really puts the pinch on Ukrainian units in this area. Now you're talking about 2 miles at the most. At the absolute most, the Ukrainians have 2 miles. That basically means that they are in rifle range from people on both sides. Mortar range, definitely. FPV range. There is likely no escaping from this without taking severe casualties at this point. If the Russians do advance out any further, say they make it to this reservoir or something, this is practically a closed encirclement. So I don't know why the Ukrainians are still here. I don't understand what is happening with this, but it needs to be corrected very quick, or a very bad situation is going to start developing. The Russians have also pushed up to the Terkon waste heap here, and it is pretty vital that the Russians capture this Terkon and this one right here, along with this industrial area, to really begin operations into Toretsk. Once these two are captured, like I've said, operations into Toretsk will come very, very, very quick. As well, once this high ground is captured, I believe that most of New York is going to collapse, and then this line is going to stabilize, and we're going to be looking at something much closer to this. We'll be looking at something like this for the front line. Something like that. And you can see how much difference that makes in terms of the overall salient and the ability to apply pressure to Toretsk itself. That's coming. This battle is probably going to take place during most of the fall. I think that the fall, you're going to see a lot of the Battle of Toretsk take place. Maybe not during the fall, but late summer, August, September, and then probably wrap up by October. Just a guess by the way things are moving. When will this ship be over? Probably like 2026. That's always been my guess. 2026. All right. All right, guys. All right, let's see. We have one last update here. On the Siversk salient, the Russians have advanced along this tree line and have moved into a fortification at the top of this tree line. So another massive advance here for the Russians. Not massive is in terms of the tactical situation. Advancing and capturing a fortification in this region will allow the Russians to begin pushing out towards Velika and Prizny over here. Once these two settlements have fallen, the battle for Siversk will begin. We're getting very, very close, guys, to multiple large, very, very crucial, critical battles starting in the SMO. So we have Toretsk into York, right? Chasiv Yar, Pokrovsk, potentially southern Donetsk, Vuhledar, and then Siversk at the same time. A lot happening, and then who knows if this opens up and the Ukrainians are forced to rotate reserves, then Kupiansk could be threatened. You're looking at 5 large urban battles that could kick off basically in a moment's notice if a breakthrough occurs. Why is Sinkivka such a hard nut to crack up north? All right, well, there's a couple reasons. First off, it is very, very easy for the Ukrainians staging-wise. They have Kupiansk city here. They've been able to move equipment across the Oskol, even with the bridges getting taken out and stuff like that. And the distance is not far for the Ukrainians here. So this is technically probably the easiest area to defend logistically, whereas areas like this are the most difficult to defend logistically. Outside of that, Sinkivka is up against a forest right here, which is incredibly difficult for the Russians to move through and completely negates their armor advantage. And these fields over here are, again, just wide open fields with fortifications. So moving in this area is just difficult for the Russians. Also, it's such a hard nut to crack because the Ukrainians are making it that hard to crack. A lot of the progress you guys see from the Russian side is when the Ukrainians either make a mistake or they don't have the resources to respond to something. The way that Ukraine fights is they hold everything and they overcommit resources to continue holding everything for as long as they possibly can. That's what they've been doing in Kupiansk for like a year and a half now. So this is nothing new. And as soon as the forced disposition in this region turns, which it eventually will, because Kupiansk is not going to be very important if Siversk falls or Chasiv Yar falls or something like that. The operational significance of this area lessens greatly. If that occurs, Ukraine might lower their manpower here, move their manpower to defend, Kramatorsk or Pokrovsk or something, and then this whole salient will move very quick. Because there's really no point in the Ukrainians being on this side of the river at this point. After the failed push to Kreminna, it just doesn't make any sense to have units logistically stranded here. This right here is now the Ukrainian Kherson, right? That's what this is. Their garrison isn't quite as big, and they're not backed up against exactly the same kind of river like the Dnieper is, but you can see that if the Ukrainians get cut off and they're outnumbered, this entire region right here, just like the Kherson bridgehead over here, is going to need to be withdrawn from to prevent encirclement or massive loss of life. But yeah. All right, guys. I think that's everything for the map today. Go ahead and get some questions in. I'm going to just talk with you guys. I don't have any articles today. All the articles were just talking about some of the strikes, which I'm actually going to get into here, the Ukraine drone strikes that we've seen over the past couple of last night. Calibrated means getting hit by a caliber missile. No, it's just, well, I mean, it's a play on words. Calibrated is usually spelled with a C, but I used a K because of the caliber missile. Because that was primarily what was being used at the beginning of the conflict for the Russians. So, yeah, calibrated. It was a good name. I like it. Bro, make a supply map. That sounds like a lot of work. Do you mean like logistics supplies, like where the lines of logistics run through? Scott, any update on the hospital? Whose rocket was it? Are you talking about the one in Kiev? Because I have made that argument that I believe that it was a Russian missile the entire time. I think that it was an intended strike. I think that the casualties were extremely low because the Russians did a casualty um, analysis before they did the strike, and I think that they destroyed a energy infrastructure facility on the grounds of the hospital that was being used to reroute power to the Artyom or Artemis or whatever that plant is, the plant that got hit 7 times because it was just right down the road. Could have been a mistake, could have been an interception, and the missile came down in the wrong area, but it's all too perfect for me to say that it was a mistake. If it was a mistake, that was the luckiest mistake that has ever happened for the Ukrainians, for the people in that hospital. If that missile came down so perfectly in the middle of that courtyard and didn't hit any of the hospital facilities besides the, I think it was like the dialysis center, basically, there would have been no casualties. The only casualties that occurred were 2 adults in the neighboring building that were injured or that were killed when the building kind of came down. But outside of that, the hospital wasn't hit. The only thing that was hit was the large substation building that was in the center of the strike. So that's my personal opinion on it. You guys are more than welcome to disagree. It looks like a KH-101 missile to me. That's what I'm going to go with. It's a war, guys. The hospitals are not safe from targeting if they're being used for other means. And if there's a large substation, if I was Ukrainian, this is just my position. If I was Ukrainian and I'm fighting this war and I have the opportunity to use a substation on the grounds of a children's hospital, that if the Russians strike it, I can use it for propaganda like they did. Or if they don't strike it, the military industrial complex facility down the road is still having power rerouted to it. So it's a win-win, right? It's a win-win. That's how I view it. And the way the missile came down was perfect. It looked aimed. It all is just too coincidental for me to say that it was some sort of accident, and it doesn't look like an air defense missile. I think the CEP on it is way too wide. The destructive force, the windows that were blown out, it does not appear like air defense. And I am the first person to call bullshit air defense, Ukrainian S-300 slammed into this building. I am the first person to say that. I don't think that this is what happened. Calibrated. Do you think Putin will give up some of the 4 regions in case of a peace agreement? No, I think that the peace agreement that he just laid out was the absolute minimum that Russia is willing to accept. I think that minimum that he has laid out is going to make people very unhappy if he decides to accept it. But I don't, first off, I have a feeling that no matter what happens, if there's some peace agreement that is laid out or something that happened, I don't think that it's going to last in any meaningful way. I don't think that the Ukrainian state is going to be in a very strong position. I think that the Russians are going to have a massive amount of influence in the country after this war is over, no matter who's in charge, just because they control a vast majority of the former country now. So, either it's going to be a super hostile government and that peace agreement is not going to work out for very long, or, basically what I'm saying is, even if the Russians accept a peace agreement with Ukraine under what Putin has said, Zaporozhye, all of Donetsk, Luhansk, and Kherson City, and this Bank of Kherson, if the Ukrainians accept that and move back, I would expect that within a couple of years, we're probably going to see the conflict start again for one reason or another. That's just what I think is going to happen. But I definitely believe that is the minimum that Putin can accept. So Zaporozhye, the four oblasts, and then, but that comes along with a bunch of much more valuable assets, right? Because Kharkov is a Russian city. Yeah, awesome. That's great. But it's not going to not be a Russian city just because the Russians don't fully capture it or whatever. So if the Russians take that deal, what they're going to get in return is sanctions relief and security agreements from Kiev. And that is the goal of the SMO. The goal is not to capture all this territory. The goal is not to take over Ukraine. It has never been the goal from the beginning. The goal is NATO neutrality, security agreements on Ukraine not to, bolster their military in the same way that they did before the war and stuff like that. Protection of Russian language, culture, whatever, blah, 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 blah. And then obviously the concessions on territory. And sanctions relief, yes, sanctions relief, but that comes from the West. So who knows if that's going to happen? That would be if there are sanctions, if there's sanctions relief, that would be the Russians could just walk out of Ukraine at that point and have basically totally won. If the Russians somehow force the West to drop sanctions, that is just it's an instant omission of defeat by the West. That's what that is. So Odessa and Kharkov is not happening. No, I did not say that in the slightest. I don't think that a peace deal can really be reached at this point. I think that the Kiev regime is so there. Like I said, there has to be regime change in Moscow or Kiev at this point, I believe, to actually make peace happen. Now, Zelensky is talking very heavily about peace. He's starting to talk about inviting Russia to the peace summits and stuff like this. Crazy nonsense a year ago. Now he's talking about it, and I made a post the other day talking about how the winds of the winds of diplomacy, the winds of negotiations, the talk has changed in Kiev. They're starting to realize that this thing is over. It's over. There's not much more, not much more they can do. Not very far that they can go now. And so the goal is either prevent a collapse and fight for as long as possible, sign a deal that allows you to stay in power and isn't a complete defeat, or live in exile. Right? Those are the choices that Zelensky has. I don't think Zelensky's going to go with the peace negotiations because that is the end of his presidency. He's no longer the legitimate president of Ukraine. He's not going to win re-election at this point. And I don't know if he survives leaving. This is a thing, is we don't know exactly what's going on. So I don't believe that there's going to be a peace settlement. I do believe the fighting is going to go on basically until the Russians reach the river. I don't think that there's much of an option at this point for either side. I don't think that they can decide what they're going to do. And I think that that is going to likely probably be the end of it. I don't know if you're ever going to see Odessa being captured by the Russians. It's not that it can't happen. If there's a massive collapse in Ukraine, say the government runs away, they're in exile, the Russians just come in and sweep the whole place. Not all the way out here, but what they want up to the river, maybe Nikolaev, Odessa, whatever. If the Russians, that is always a possibility. That if it happens, it happens. But I would not be surprised if Putin made a deal for the 4 oblasts and all of that, all of the more important stuff. Odessa is still just going to be Odessa. Yes, it won't be Russian, but it's still going to be Odessa. It's not. It doesn't change anything. Whereas NATO neutrality for Ukraine changes the entire conflict in Ukraine and neutralizes the threat that Ukraine posed. The whole point of the SMO done right there, right? Security agreements, potentially sanctions relief would be huge for the Russians. You could see Odessa and Kharkov. You very well could. The longer the war goes on, especially, the better chance you have of seeing that. I just don't know. It depends on how the U.S. election goes, I think, is how the Kiev regime is going to play it. If Kamala wins, I think they're going to keep fighting the way that they are. If Trump wins, we could see something else. Have there been much use of Kh-52 helicopters recently? I haven't seen any mention of it since the Kiev summer offensive last year. Also, what happened to the U.S. sending A-10 Warthogs? Okay, well, A-10 Warthogs are useless in Ukraine. They would be doing the exact same thing Su-27 or Su-25s would be doing, except they're much bigger and just more expensive, easy to hit, harder to maintain. Doesn't make any sense. You have to train pilots. Doesn't make any sense to deliver those planes. There is no close air support happening for the Ukrainians. So A-10s don't make any sense. Don't even bother. And the Ka-52s are still being used. You don't have the Ukrainians running at the Russians through open fields where the Ka-52s can sit back and fire, ATGMs at 10 kilometers away and take out overly exposed units. What it more realistically, what they're being utilized for now is, sometimes you see a LMUR missile hit a Ukrainian control point or staging position or something like that. They're still around. They're still being utilized. They just don't need to be. They're valuable assets, and you don't want to push them into prepared Ukrainian defenses. The reason why they work so well in the counteroffensive was because the Ukrainians. Let's just say that this is the Ukrainians have to keep. Hold on. The Ukrainians have to keep their air defenses like back here to keep them safe, right? So this is where the Ukrainians have to keep their air defenses. I'm just going to make it blue and make it huge. Okay, so behind this line is where the Ukrainian air defense is safe, right? That covers something like this, maybe, right? And with that kind of coverage, let's go purple. Ka-52s can just sit back here and fire ATGMs at advancing Ukrainian troops, right? Now, if the Russians are pushing, let's say that the Russians are pushing over, like in York and Toretsk, Pokrovsk, let's say Pokrovsk. All right, and Ukrainian AD is positioned, man pads, anything, just any Ukrainian air defense capabilities are, say they're positioned, that's actually probably pretty close to what I'm looking at here. Let me move this back. If Ukrainian air defense positions are like here, right, the Ka-52s have to be over this area practically to be shooting into Ukrainian defensive positions. The Ukrainians are not leaving the security of their air defense to push out into the helicopters. The helicopters have to push into the air defense security zone to fire on dugouts, an occasional armored vehicle. Ukrainians don't have a lot of armored vehicles. So there's just not a big necessity for helicopters right now for that purpose. The Ka-52s would probably be much better intercepting drones and helping with air defense and stuff like that than assisting on the front line, just with the current state of the front line. Now, we have seen videos of Ka-52s offering more close air support and stuff like that. Again, unnecessary and risky when you can just drop a JDAM on something. So, yeah, I hope I answered your question. All right, let's see. All right, we got it. That's all the questions. Okay. I'm going to take us over to my Twitter real quick, and I just wanted to talk about the recent Ukrainian strikes. And I also wanted to talk about our good pal, Sarah Ashton Carrillo, because she's making some waves in the Ukrainian information space for the first time in a long time. So it's Volchansk. I don't care what it is. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Guys, it doesn't matter, does it? It says Vovchansk right here, right? Vovchansk. You use the name that's on the map so that people that don't know what we're talking about know what we're talking about. You can't use Russian names for Western audiences that have no idea what Russian names are. Sometimes I use Russian names and I shouldn't. But I only use them because for me, I'm lazy and I like certain Russian names over Ukrainian names. I like certain Ukrainian names over Russian names. Like I hate Artyomsk. I hate it. I hate it so much. I hate typing it out. Bakhmut is so much easier. It's so much easier to say. It like interrupts my flow. Bakhmut. So I don't know. That I go back and forth. Like I call it Lvov. Kiev. Misspelled technically. But then I call things Ukrainian names. Like I say Vugledar all the time. All right. So we had some strikes, Ukrainian drone strikes. So the Ukrainians went ahead and turn down the noise so you guys can see. Ukrainians hit a ammunition warehouse at a Russian airfield in Rostov. There you can see, very big explosion, and we have the satellite photos. So I'm actually going to show those to you guys as well. Right here, you can see the firm's data confirming the strike on the airbase. Massive fire. Most of these fires, guys, are actually from. So here's where the ammunition warehouse is. Most of these fires are just grass burning. You can see that this isn't even on the airfield. When this ammunition depot went up, it threw up a bunch of different, munitions, different flaming objects that landed in the fields and lit all the fields on fire, which you're going to see in just a second. They also, during the same attack, hit the Atlas oil storage facility. I believe this is also in Rostov. I'm not exactly sure. But again, did some damage to it. I think they took out 3 or 4 of the storage containers. But again, not the important part is not that they're targeting these things. The more specific importance of these is the fact that Ukraine continues to target Russian energy infrastructure, right? Targeting Russian energy infrastructure is dangerous because of what it could entail, right? The Russians have already made it very clear that they are going to strike Ukrainian energy infrastructure. And, the Ukrainians might just be at the point where they're like, it's going to happen anyway. We might as well get our licks in while we can, hit the Russians here, there, and there. But it doesn't affect the war. Again, this is the point that I'm always trying to make is you're dealing with like mosquito bites from the Ukrainians. They're annoying. They look bad. You don't want people to see them. They're itchy, but they go away in 3 days and it's like you never even knew that it happened, right? That's what all of these attacks are. They're not coming at a high enough rate that they're making the damage consistent and permanent. This damage is being repaired. By the time the next big drone strike happens in 2 or 3 weeks, the damage that had been done 2 months ago in the not the last attack but the previous attack has all been repaired, has all been fixed. Everything's back to normal. So Russia is a huge nation. Half of it isn't even in drone range, so you're not going to be able to stop the military industrial complex. You're not going to be able to stop fuel from reaching Ukraine to the front lines for military purposes. All of these hits are just PR. They hit the brightest, most flammable objects that they can to kind of distract away from losing cities like Krasnohorivka, losing Zalizny, the Russians pushing into New York, Toretsk, Russians pushing across the canal into Chasiv Yar. The Russians are moving everywhere. The Ukrainians are losing everywhere. But these drone strikes get the information space rabid and happy and all that. But they went too far this time, the Ukrainians did, and they made a claim that was just... So they claim, again, that they struck the Russian submarine, the Rostovv-on-Don, Rostovv-on-Don, sorry, in the Sevastopol port. This was the submarine that had already been struck by Storm Shadow cruise missiles. They claimed that they had completely destroyed it. It was then repaired, removed out of dry dock into wet dock, I believe. And then the Ukrainians are claiming that they struck it again. So if we come up here, we can see the satellite photos of the building where the submarine is currently being housed. You can see that the top of the building was slightly damaged, but as far as we can tell, there was no significant damage to the submarine inside, and the canopy did its job. To claim that they destroyed the submarine is such an overstep. To maybe say damaged, we maybe damaged it, this, that, and the other, but the entire information space is now claiming that it was destroyed and sunk, which is just nonsense again. But that's what the Ukrainians have to do, is they have to keep up these PR wins. And then I skipped this. But here we have the satellite photos from the airbase. So here's before. You can see that this is the area where the ammunition storage is. And you can see that they've already had grass fires here. So grass fires do happen because of planes and stuff like that. So some of these fires are here before, grass fire over here as well. Grass fires at airfields are not abnormal. That's why they have fire departments on deck. And here you can see a large grass fire outside of the area. So this has nothing to do probably with anything getting damaged. This probably has to do with this building being, detonating. You can see fire damage here, fire damage here, fire damage here, a little bit of fire damage over here. But again, it's likely all from this strike. And you can see that this building was, this area was completely destroyed. So not a very good strike by the Ukrainians, did some damage. But again, what does it change about the war? What effect does it have on the war? That's the question. And I'm seeing little to none. We got another question here. Yo, Scott. Russia is preparing. Dima claims the other day as progression to Pokrovsk, it will slow as current captured major supply cities, i.e. Dima for the stretch. Well, that's slowed temporarily perhaps, but when you look at the map here, you can see that the Russians are already very close to entering Hordivka here. Once the Russians enter that, they are going to gain another staging area, another area to run logistics into Pokrovsk. So no, I don't. Avdiivka was far away a long time ago, or Chitny is starting to get far away now. But the Russians are about to enter two different cities that they're going to be able to turn into their logistics hubs for continuation of hostilities towards Mihrad and Pokrovsk. So no, I don't think so. I don't think that's going to be a massive issue coming up for the Russians. Thank you for your question. Let's see. Hasn't it been like 40 degrees Celsius the last few weeks in southern Ukraine? I have no idea, boys. Is it cold or hot? Cold. 40 Celsius. Get your questions in, boys. Get your questions in. I'm just going to show you the little update from Sarah Ashton Carrillo, which is actually a very ballsy move, kind of out of left field sort of thing here. But I'll go ahead and read this to you. So the office of Colonel General Sirsky is compromised by foreign influence. I imagine she means Russian. Documents and messages indicate that the Ukrainian commander-in-chief's office is manipulated into ignoring civilian chain of command. I think that means ignoring Zelensky's orders. I think that's what it means, the president. President Zelensky and Minister Umarov must investigate. So this is a wild thing to come out and say. While living in Ukraine and while, fighting for the Ukrainian armed forces, coming out and saying that the commander-in-chief of the Ukrainian armed forces is manipulated by Russians, I imagine, is what she's talking about. I don't know how. You're going to get court-martialed and potentially executed. Okay, guys. Again, here's the thing. I see a lot of this. It's a dude. Yeah, it is a dude. Guys, it doesn't cost you anything to respect people's pronouns, even if you don't care about them. It takes more energy to fight it than just be like, whatever, do whatever you want. Be annoying, be yourself, go do it somewhere else. I don't give a shit. Why cause a problem if that's what somebody wants to be called? Yeah, of course it's a guy. She doesn't even try anymore, but she changed her name to Sarah. So I'm going to go ahead and keep calling her, they, a girl, right? She. And if you just say their pronouns, they can't argue that you're some transphobe or some racist or, whatever. They have to actually present an argument for what they're talking about, and they can't do it. That's what I've always done. You always just respect the people you're arguing against and destroy them with the actual information. Not, oh, it's a guy or whatever. It's just, that's so stupid. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, bro. Let dudes dress up like girls if they want to dress up like girls. That's a dude you don't have to deal with, and one less dude stealing chicks from you. Who cares? Who gives a shit? And they're not passing on their genetic material, so your kids don't have to deal with their dumbass kids. It doesn't matter. The only time it matters, guys, is if they're pushing it on your family. If it's like global homo stuff and they're pushing it on you and forcing you to, if it's compelled language, that's different. Compelling somebody to do something because it hurts your feelings or something like that, that's a completely different thing. I'm not talking about that. And I do know that that group tends to do that. What I'm talking about is just respecting people for whatever if they're Jewish, if they're Muslim, if they're Christian, if they're gay, if they're straight, if they're trans, doesn't matter, doesn't affect my life. Stay in your own home, do it yourself. Who gives a shit? And yeah, if you think it's mental illness, sure, it's mental illness. Who cares? Bro, there's schizophrenic people. They have mental illness, right? They exist. There's people with depression. I personally know people who are trans that are much healthier than normal straight people that I know. So, I mean, this is so stupid. Just let people be people. Who gives a shit? Who gives a shit, man? Y'all care too much about what other people are doing in their bedrooms and how people are dressing and stuff. What did Russia ship to Tehran on an IL-76 yesterday? Who knows, dude? Who knows? Could be anything. Could be advisors. Could be any number of things. Really, nobody knows. Could be weapons. They could be flying an IL-76 to pick up something to take to Russia. Who knows? They've been doing that the entire war. These IL-76s have been going from Moscow to Tehran since 2023. So that is nothing new. I wouldn't even overanalyze it. Scott, the Ukrainians made he change back. Yeah, I don't know, bro. I don't know. Listen, you can laugh at it. I mean, it's goofy, it's funny. The whole thing is a very, very comedic thing. It's just if you're trying to make your argument an argument, don't talk about somebody's genitalia or gender preferences or anything like that. Just destroy the idiotic, stupid shit she says and say she. Because then it's not about you not liking the person. It's about you not liking the information and you destroying the person's argument. That's the point I'm trying to make, guys. All right, guys. I think that's where I'm going to wrap it up today. Actually, hold on. So then I went back though, and this is kind of funny. So this post was on June 26th.
Stability in Kyiv.
And we can just listen to how the opinion of Sarah Ashton Carrillo, has changed since.
So when our international partners see the stability in Kyiv under President Zelensky and his team, they feel more confident to be able to continue to give us the tools necessary to once again carry out the military plans under Colonel General Siversk that will eventually lead us to victory.
Nice. So apparently now we're not trusting Zelensky to carry out those plans that we were a month ago. Oh, how things change so very quick. That's pretty crazy. Bro, you know what? If in your head you want to be High Emperor of the Galaxy, nobody gives a shit. If that's what you want to be called, I'll go, what's up, Emp? How you doing? What does it matter? You're a delusional crazy person. I'll call you whatever you want so you don't stab me, bro. It's awesome. Nobody cares. It doesn't affect me at all. It's like, it's the same thing like waving in your own neighborhood. If you see somebody in your own neighborhood and you wave to them, this happens in the city all the time for me. People don't wave back. Like your neighbors don't even know who you are. I wave to everybody in my neighborhood because I figure worst case scenario, if shit hits the fan, maybe they won't come and try to kill me for my food first. I don't know. But I wave to everybody. And when people look at me and then don't wave back, it's like it took more energy for you to Think about not waving and then to not wave and try to ignore me than to just do this, even if you didn't mean it, right? So that's what I mean by pronouns. Stop wasting your time on shit that does not matter. That's my whole thing. It's my whole thing. If it keeps people happy and it just puts them in a box and you can just leave it over there, why not? Why give them something to whine and complain about more than they already do? Doesn't make any sense. That's my position on it, guys. All right. I'm going to get out of here, guys. Thank you so much for watching today. I do have a video that I'm working on right now, doing some editing on it. It has some predictions for the upcoming trajectory of the SMO, how the Russians are going to advance on Pokrovsk, Ugledar, potentially Kupiansk, Chasiv Yar, New York, and Toretsk. I have different maps. I'm doing a bunch of arrows, big arrows stuff going on. So that should be coming out maybe today, maybe tomorrow. I don't know. Depends on how the editing goes. Be on the lookout for that. And be sure to go check out Demonetized episode number 12 that just came out and number 10 that just became free for all free members on Patreon, guys. Thank you so much. Have a fantastic rest of your weekend. Please like, subscribe, follow me on Telegram and Twitter. Take care. Have an amazing Saturday.